Good evening. It's Tuesday night. It's about almost 9 o'clock. And tomorrow at 10:45 a.m. in the morning, our government is going to visit another travesty upon education in America. So I thought I would talk about that a little bit. So I want to address the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is essentially the reauthorization of the Esea and No Child Left Behind reauthorization. And they're calling it now Every Student Succeeds Act, which sounds strangely like No Child Left Behind. I'd like to also start by saying President Obama has already come out and stated that if the bill comes across his desk as is, that he will sign it and not have any problems doing so, which I think is important to remember, and I'll touch back on that later. What really bothers me about this is we've seen this whole game plan before, except the first time we saw it, Congress wasn't involved in it. And that, of course, was when Race to the Top and Common Core first came about. President Obama and Arne Duncan found a way to bypass Congress, and they pushed these things through. And the next thing I knew, it was thrust upon all of our states and all of our communities and all of our children. And Common Core has been, I think I can say, a disaster, because it isn't just a matter of a rollout. When you roll out a bad product, I don't care how well you roll it out, eventually everybody finds out it's a bad product. And that's what Common Core has been. It's been a disaster from day one. It was called No Child Left Behind on steroids, which essentially it was. Neither one of those things have been good for education. Ironically, it was the reformers who came up with No Child Left Behind, complained about a decade of poor educational results as a result of No Child Left Behind, and now the reformers are reforming their own reform. So maybe it's them that's the problem. And, of course, some politicians. At any rate, it came out, the bill was released to the public. Today is Tuesday, December 8th. And the bill was released to the public on Monday, November 30th. And my representative, John Katko, and his friends down in Washington voted it through on Wednesday, December 2nd, 2 days after it was released to the public. Now, the bill was close to 1,100 pages long. I've heard the 1,059 pages, 1,061 pages. But here, picture, if you will, a stack of paper twice this big, because I didn't have enough in my house. But twice that big is about the size of the bill if you go by the number of pages. This is about 550 or so. So yeah, just double this, and that was the size of the bill. And I'm sure that, they've read all of every word on every page of the bill they passed. Not. A friend of mine said that the Republicans got a little bit of what they wanted, and Democrats got a little bit of what they wanted in this bill. So my question is, so it's not supposed to be about Republicans and Democrats. What did the American people get? More importantly, what did the American students and children of our nation get in this great reauthorization and rewrite, which is now Every Student Succeeds Act? I'll tell you what we got. We got screwed by the federal government again, and I can back it up. The big claim here is that it gives the power back to state. The states will be able to, have some power. However, this bill is still test-centric in that it controls the states and this testing mandate. As a matter of fact, the rewrite, Every Student Succeeds Act, requires a greater percentage of students to be tested, including a higher percentage of special ed students to take the standardized tests. So, I'm sorry, did they not hear people the last 4 or 5 years complaining about this high-stakes testing going on? So now they've rewritten it, and it's this great sell, and the states have all this power, except there's still this federal mandate, and I'll repeat it, that the Every Student Succeeds Act requires a greater percentage of students to be tested, and including a requirement of a higher percentage of special ed students to take a standardized test. Doesn't sound like we got the better end of the deal there. Well, let's move on. All the state plans, they can make their own curriculum, but they have to align and make the kids college and career ready, because the kids in Wisconsin and the kids in New York and the kids in California and the kids in Hawaii all have to be college and career ready according to the Federal Education Department. So all the state's plans are subject to federal approval, meaning a state could go through, make these great standards, write great curriculum, put millions of dollars into it, and then it could all be tossed out by Fed Ed. So how many states do you think are going to veer too far away from the Common Core state standards with that kind of man hours and monetary investment? Probably not very many. The term federal oversight that shows up in the bill frightens me, and I've just cited some examples of that. There really are no checks and balances on the federal education department in this bill. They can come in and they still hold the deciding sway over what states do. I fail to see how that is moving us away from Common Core. Some other things that bother me about it is that I think there's some provisions that open the door even further for privateers to get involved in education and hedge fund managers and essentially come in and make a buck off of the children of our communities. That bothers me because if you open that door too far, that door is going to become a floodgate. And I don't know how you get, opening Pandora's box. I don't know how you jam all that stuff back in when these people finally wake up and realize that the American people really are the ones that are in control. And I'm not against private education, but not when the cost is eliminating public education, which is really one of the things that's going on here. Let's face it. Anybody who's been following along knows that this is the push. So now these privatizers have even greater leverage in controlling certain parts of our educational experience and making a buck off it. I don't think these people see our children the way we see the children of our community. They see them as, to quote, human capital, and it's it's part of their bottom line. I believe there's another part of this bill that talks about teacher training, and I went to school in New York State when we used to be the leaders in education. A teacher in New York State not only had to get a teaching degree, we were required by law to get a master's degree within a certain amount of time of our first teaching job, thereby making us some of the most educated educators in the country. And now I believe there's a provision in the Every Student Succeeds Act for teacher training. Let's just put it this way. I don't think someone who goes through a 6 or 8 week Teach for America program and spends a year in a classroom is as good as a teacher who goes to a 4-year college, gets a master's degree, and gets a lot more teaching experience. I don't even think there's a comparison. But this bill opens the door for more of that sort of thing to happen. I don't know who you want in your classrooms, but I want the kids in my community taught by teachers who had similar trainings to what I had to go through myself. So that bothers me. This whole bill is just open for abuses by a lot of people at a lot of levels. And what bothers me the most is that they voted it through within 10 days. Tomorrow at 10:45 a.m., my senators and yours, the majority of them, are going to go ahead and push this monstrosity through. Like I say, my representative voted on it 2 days after it came out. There's no way in hell he read twice as many pages as this? I don't think so. And now, in my case, I have Senator Gillibrand and Senator Schumer, who have said they're going to vote yes on it, regardless of the amount of calls they got saying vote no. So I would urge you, between now and 10:45 a.m., get on Twitter, get on social media, email your senator, tell them vote no, and tell them that you demand, as one of their constituents, remember they're supposed to be representing you, demand that they send you a letter stating clearly that they have read the entire bill, all 1,000 plus pages of it, that they read it cover to cover, every word, and understood exactly what they were voting on, and tell them to include how they voted. And you want it signed by them, not one of their office people. I believe as a constituent, you are within your rights to ask for that. I would also assure them that if they refuse to do that, then you would interpret that to mean that they indeed did not read the entire bill, yet voted on it anyway. I believe you'd be correct in that interpretation, because hell, if I read that bill, man, I'd want people to know that's a lot of pages. So I would ask for that. And going back to the Obama thing, it's this big sales pitch that the states are going to have all this control and the locals will have all this control. Obama said he would sign this thing and not even put up a fight against the Republicans or the Democrats. He's not even going to put up a fight. So let me ask you this. The Obama administration, along with Arne Duncan, they were the ones who brought Race to the Top and Common Core into our communities and rained it down on our children with zero compassion and zero input from people that should have had input. Do you really think President Obama is going to sign a bill smiling and happy that would do away with his baby, Common Core? Not going to happen. And if you listen to everything I just said, Common Core ain't going away. And let's talk about that. One of the other things that bothers me about this bill is it has no sunset clause. What that means is it has no ending time. They're putting it in place for 4 years, but without a sunset clause. That means if nothing else replaces it, that's the rule of the land until something else comes along. Case in point, No Child Left Behind lapsed in 2008. Nothing came along to replace it until now. And so that's what we lived by for the last 7 years, even after it lapsed, because it didn't specifically have an ending date. So what's this bill do? It's going to further solidify Common Core in the majority of cases and cement it further for another generation of children. Which brings me to my point. Legislators, congressmen especially, you had a pass the first time when Race to the Top and Common Core was thrust upon the American public because you were bypassed just like we were, and you had a right to be angry, and you probably should have stood up for us then, but you didn't. Now, you had a chance here to do everything right. You had a chance to right so many wrongs. You had a chance to actually listen to the public, your constituency, that has been screaming for 4 years about Common Core. You had a chance to wipe it out. You had a chance to really move our nation forward. You had a chance to prove that you also were not in the pockets of privateers and hedge fund managers and the Gates and the Broads of the world. You blew it. So you have zero credibility. You have even less credibility with the American public now than you did a week ago. And your numbers are at an all-time low. Haven't you been paying attention? You have no credibility. So to my senators, Schumer and Gillibrand, and also to Mr. Katko, I will do everything in my power to see that you no longer are in office to serve the public of New York State. Because you know what? You don't serve the public of New York State anyhow. None of you do. Well, a couple of you are left, I'll give you that much. But the vast majority of you, by voting yes on this bill, have really shown where your true colors lie. You had a chance. You don't get a pass this time. You're going to be held accountable. Which brings me to my last and final point. Regardless of how I feel about Donald Trump, and this is for the politicians and the pundits who don't seem to quite understand Trump's appeal to a lot of the American electorate, let me tell you, Trump's appeal, you created it. You created it because you have proven to the American public that you cannot be trusted to do what is right for your constituency, and you have certainly proven that you will not listen to your constituency. You created Trump's appeal, for better or for worse. You're accountable for what happens with that. I don't get it, but I'm tired of it, and I'm not alone. So if you want to, anybody who wants to listen to this, feel free to share it with your representatives and your congressman in Washington, D.C., and say, this guy speaks for me. Or write your own letter, but do something. Make their lives hell, because they're making ours hell, and they're certainly not doing our children any favors, and that really rankles me, and it should you too. Have a nice night. Sorry this ran so long. I'm John. This has been Off the Cuff.